Before I start, I'd also like to acknowledge those encouraging words of the Minister, both in relation to the program of Sentence to Employment. I think that is very encouraging, and it's seeing like there's already some early signs of success there, and let's hope that we see that continue. But also, I think it's important, those words around encouragement to staff in the department as well as in his ministerial office, and why it's important to, I think, given that encouragement around taking risks, and those risks being on the basis that it is with good intent. And if it means that that risk will result in positive change, well, I think that's a good thing. So thank you, Minister. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners on which country we are meeting today, the Central Aranda people. And I'd also like to acknowledge the Deputy Administrator of the NT, Dr. Pat Miller, who I understand was here early on, and in fact saw her on my way out way in as she was heading out. But like Wendy said today, this presentation will include a brief introduction about NIDAC, the National Indigenous Drug Alcohol Committee, some background information on Indigenous Australians in the justice system, and also some background information on the prison-related health risks. Sorry. Oh, I think I'm one slide out. Sorry about this. It's a bit of a bad start. Background on prison-related health risks, the cost-benefit analysis project undertaken by NIDAC that Wendy spoke about, and also some information on a new approach to imprisonment. So the National Indigenous Drug Alcohol Committee, NIDAC, was established in 2004 and by the Australian National Council on Drugs, ANCD, which is the principal advisory body to the Prime Minister and the Australian Government on alcohol and drug policy in the country. NIDAC's key role and responsibilities are to identify and embrace the opportunities to influence decisions that reduce alcohol and other drug problems and associated harms in Indigenous communities nationally, and to provide advice to the ANCD and the Australian Government based on this collective expertise and experience, as well as through ongoing consultation that is done throughout the country throughout the year with various stakeholders and relevant experts. Members of NIDAC is made up of predominantly Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that have expertise in alcohol and other drugs, a drug field around Australia. And this slide here shows the NIDAC executive members. And some of you may recognise Ted Wilkes from Western Australia, and he's the chair of NIDAC. This slide shows the rest of the committee members of NIDAC, and as you can see, there is representation from most states and territories across the country. So, responding to the concerns over the number of Indigenous prisoners and Indigenous Australian in prisons and juvenile detention centres, NIDAC developed this position called Paper on Bridges and Barriers Addressing Indigenous Incarceration, and it was initially released in 2009 and then again in February this year with a revised version. This slide highlights some of the high rates of incarceration, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, but namely that despite the Indigenous population making up around 2.5% of Australia, the population for prisoners is around 26% and 49% for juveniles in corrective institutions are Aboriginal and Torres Strait, with about 14 times more likely to be imprisoned than non-Aboriginal people in this country. So, as you're all familiar with, we've got still a long way to go to get that rate down. But even what's more alarming is that since the Royal Commission into Aboriginal Deaths in Custody that was done in 1991, we've seen a 343% increase in the incarceration of women. So that's an appalling statistic that also needs to be addressed. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander offenders with an existing substance use, mental health or physical health problem often have complex needs. Separation from family, their culture, together with a previous history of undiagnosed or untreated health conditions, places Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander offenders at greater risk while in the correctional system. And what this slide highlights the higher rates of Hep C virus and mental health and drug and alcohol problems for offenders. There is a danger of these issues, health issues, if left unattended, exacerbating or actually causing other health problems while the prisoner is in detention or in prison. With Hep C, there is also the risk of this being transmitted onto others post-release. So NIDOC was well aware of these, of the health benefits for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people being diverted away from the prison system, but identified the need for a cost-benefit analysis to be done. So NIDOC engaged Deloitte's Access Economics and in 2012 to undertake this analysis, and the report on this work was released by NIDOC and ANCD in February this year. In summary, the cost-benefit analysis involved comparing two pathways, namely the prison pathway and the residential rehabilitation, alcohol and other drug rehabilitation pathway. The target population included Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander offenders who were post-trial, pre-sentence, and faced the possibility of going to prison. They also had non-violent offences and had problematic substance use issues with potential to benefit from diversion. The ABS figures, which estimated the number of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the prison system, looked at also the data on the number entering prison for non-violent offences, and figures linking offending to alcohol and other use were also used, as were the number of prisons and costs associated with running them, and the number of residential rehabs and their cost. Outcomes such as recidivism, health outcomes including mental health, service use, risk of contracting Hep C and drug relapse rates were also considered and factored into the calculations, as well as non-financial benefits such as improved mortality and quality of life were also considered. In 2011, there were 115 custodial facilities costing around $3 billion per annum, both capital and recurrent. And for the period 2009-10, there were 30 facilities providing residential drug and alcohol treatment for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So there's a big gap there in terms of the need and the demand out there for alcohol and other drug treatment services. So when we looked at this, the actual cost benefit analysis indicated $111,000 per year per offender cost saving by diverting a non-violent Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander offender with substance use problems into a treatment program rather than prison. Additionally, there was a $92,000 offender saving in the long term due to the lower mortality and better health related quality of life outcomes. This slide highlights these savings. Under costs, you can see the costs associated with a person being in prison versus the residential treatment is $114,832 versus $18,385, which results in a saving of around $96,446 if the person goes to rehab rather than prison. Then if you look under the additional benefits section, you can also see the costs associated in the different areas of recidivism, mental health service usage, Hep C treatment costs, and costs associated with drug use for those who relapse for offenders in prison versus being in a residential alcohol and other drug rehab program. This results in a further saving of around $15,000 if the person goes into rehab instead of prison. Then if you add these two figures together, you have the overall net financial benefit of $111,458 if a person goes to a residential rehab treatment program rather than prison. So this slide here outlines the figures representing the monetary value of improvements in mortality and quality of life, and represents the benefits of using residential treatment, rehabilitation, in addition to the financial benefits. So here you can see that there is a further saving of approximately $92,000 if a person is deferred to residential rehab rather than placed in a prison. The Deloitte's work shows considerable benefits associated with diversion of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander prisoners into community residential drug and alcohol rehabilitation services instead of imprisonment, as well as financial savings, as well as improvements in health and mortality. We know that imprisonment is not working for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. It is not able to address the underlying causes of offending, although there are some secondary prevention strategies that the Minister just recently spoke about that are being introduced here in the NT. We do need to start spending government funds in a smarter way. So what this report is saying is not that you need additional money, but what you do with existing resources and how you can redistribute that resource into what we now know works in terms of diversion programs that have a huge benefit, and avoid the negative labelling and stigma, and reduce the number of people going back to prison, and really putting the shift of the investment into community-based and Aboriginal community-controlled rehabilitation services. So what's being promoted in parts of the country, and particularly in New South Wales recently with the launch of the Justice Reinvestment Campaign, is actually looking at justice reinvestment being promoted as a new way. And as you can see from this slide, it involves a shift in spending and not an increase in funding. It acknowledges that there is still a need for prisons, but not to the extent and degree that currently exists. And it involves a focus on increasing community safety and reducing offending and imprisonment. And it's based on what we know works and is community driven. So work is currently being undertaken in the town of Bourke in New South Wales. The Bourke community approached the New South Wales Justice Reinvestment campaign for Aboriginal young people to develop a justice reinvestment implementation plan. And Bourke has been identified as having the highest number of breaches to bail conditions in New South Wales, no residential alcohol and other drug treatment services, and a lack of alcohol and other drug and mental health services. And it's looked at young Aboriginal people aged 10 to 24 years and 47 youth identified. And the cost of incarceration for these youth is estimated to be over $2 million. Funding could be used to establish programs such as youth diversion and family case management. Work is still ongoing, and everyone is waiting to see how the project takes off. So NIDAC is calling on a justice reinvestment approach, which involves shifting part of the spending away from prisons towards community-based programs and services that address the factors that can contribute to criminal behaviour. So apart from welfare dependency and the need for engaging in employment, we also see the need to ensure that we've got adequate alcohol and other drug treatment programs that are also contributing to the reasons as to why people offend. And we want to see that these factors contribute to the change in criminal behaviour, as well as the inclusion of targets that look at incarceration rates for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander men and women and youth as part of the government's Closing the Gap Prime Minister's report that's done annually. So further information about NIDAC and the committee and access to the reports or the position papers and to subscribe to the NIDAC weekly news can be obtained from this website. So thank you very much for asking me to share with you this piece of work that NIDAC has done. Thank you.